the recording, and Sharon is going to now start the introductions of the presenters.
Great. Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody who is on this Zoom conference. You all want to be better at what you love doing, which is hiking, and so do I. And I'm the education chair of the Mid-Hudson ADK chapter, so I've kind of been tasked with doing this. And this was kind of my idea because I lead hikes and I'm constantly getting asked questions about things, and thought it would be great if we had a big conference with some of the luminaries of the hiking world, and one of whom is Dave Mong, who you just saw. And Dave has been a longtime instructor and director of the ADK Winter Weekend and Winter Mountaineering School. And he is the recipient of the Winter Mountaineering School Leadership Award. And I looked on the ADK Mountaineering site, and Dave is quite a well of knowledge. And he was actually referred to me by our own Russ Fowler, who is also on the call and is also going to be giving his wisdom tonight. Russ is a leader for our chapter and also for AMC. And Russ's passion, I believe, is doing backpacking and teaching newbies how to backpack. And Russ does some pretty adventurous paddling as well. He does Hudson River paddling out into little unknown islands out in the middle of the Hudson River, and does sled backpacking. So we've got a pretty great crowd here. I'll turn the meeting back over to Dave, and we can begin.
Great, thank you, Sharon. The way we're going to do this meeting at this point is amongst ourselves as the leaders, we have got a fairly open-ended agenda. The main thing we want to do is answer your questions. So we're going to start with a number of topics, and then we're going to get into a video that we created of what I wear on a hike. And then each of the other leaders are going to talk about what they do on a hike. And the same thing is true for another video where we show what do I carry in my pack. And then we'll go into the various questions you've answered that you have asked, and we want to make sure that all of those get taken care of. So the first thing is, what do you do when you're planning a hike? These aren't necessarily in order, but you want to make sure that you set a turnaround time. You want to decide in advance, when do I want to be home? Do I want to hike in the dark on the last 2 hours while I'm going downhill where the snow is deep and you're up in the pine needles of the tree getting your eyes poked? Most of the time you don't want to do that. So you set a time that you want to be back to your car. You learn how to do this by practice. So we recommend that you go with someone the first few times you do a hike. Preferably go on a Mid-Hudson chapter hike group. Otherwise, go with some friends of yours that have experience, because otherwise you're going to have the trial and error in the wintertime, and that's sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. But in the wintertime, there's very little margin for error. You want to check for various kinds of intel about the hike that you're going to do. If you're going to the Catskills, there's a Facebook group called the Catskill Mountaineer or Catskill Trail Conditions group. That's a good source for finding out from other people. Hey, have you been on the trail from up to Peekamoose in the last couple of days? What are the conditions? So that way you can figure out, well, do I need to bring crampons, or can I get by with just micro spikes, or do I need snowshoes? Or are the ice conditions terrible because of the ice storm and I should just stay home? The more that you can plan ahead of time, the more likely you can have a successful and safe hike. I always try to have a backup plan. So when I have a hike and I get to the parking lot and I find there's no place to park, what do? I have already typically found a different hike that I would do if I can't find space in a parking lot. I always try and find a backup buddy. I have a friend from Ohio that I use, who always knows where I'm going, when I'm going to be out. And that way, if I don't get out by the time I promised that I will get out, he will call the forest rangers to come look for me. There's such a little margin for error in the wintertime that if you get cold, you can get dead pretty quickly. So you want to try and make sure that that's avoided. Make sure that you plan your hiking route within your ability level. I personally like to hike slow. I like to take the time to take pictures, look at the view, and help beginners that are coming along on my hikes. I don't schedule 12-mile hikes. I schedule 6-mile hikes so that I can get that done in the time frame that I'm comfortable with. I, generally speaking, do not hike alone. The minimum number of people in the wintertime should probably be no less than 4. Russ, do you want to jump in for a second and give us an explanation as to why we have that rule of thumb?
Sure. Yeah, that's been a rule for many, many years. And the purpose of it is that if somebody gets hurt, even if it's just a sprained ankle and they can't walk, you can leave one person with the injured person and send 2 people out to get help, because you can't always expect to get cell service. Like, for instance, in the Catskills, you're in those cloves and there's no reception. You have to be on a summit to really get any reception in the Catskills. So the 2 people going together for help is another safety feature, because they, if one gets hurt or if they get lost, it's easier for 2 people to rescue themselves, to get out, than just one person by themselves. And they may have to hike to the trailhead and get to a place where they can get cell service and then make a call, and that could take a while. So the person with the injured person should have certain things. The group should have certain things to help that person who's injured. Like, for instance, have a closed cell foam pad full length so that the person can lie down on the ice or the snow or even the frozen ground without being too cold. And to have some people carry a sleeping bag, but other people might carry a bivy sack. Like, I've used this one recently. It's a SOL bivy sack that has a reflective lining and a water resistant outside cover, and it can survive outdoors longer. That's the name of the company. And it's very light and small, so it's much smaller, easier to carry than a sleeping bag. Before I bought this, I used just a silver bivy sack that are available just about everywhere. This is a reflective thing, and it's just a thin piece of plastic, actually, that's a reflector. They come packed up very small, and the idea is you should always, when you buy it, if you buy one, you should unpack it right away, because if somebody needs it, it's going to take a long time to get it all unraveled. So the thing is to put the person on this closed cell pad, if they can't, to lie down, and to put them in some kind of bivy sack. And also, you can carry 2 contractor construction bags, and the purpose of those is to be give an extra layer. It's like a vapor barrier, and you can put one from their feet up to their waist and the second one from their head to their waist, but be sure you cut holes for their nose and mouth before you do that, otherwise you'll surely kill them. So you get the person comfortable, and also it'd be good to carry a lighter or matches in a waterproof container and some fire starters. I make fire, you can buy fire starters, but I make them with cardboard egg cartons. And this is one of them. Basically what you do is it's the little part of where the egg sits. And what you do is you take a bunch of old candles and melt them in a can on the stove, a can that you can throw out, and you put little sawdust into each pocket of the egg carton, and then you pour the melted wax into it, and it will dry up, get hard, and they make a good fire starter because they burn for a long time. They're like a huge candle, and so even if you have wet wood from the snow or ice, it will ignite it. And so the idea of starting a fire is, for just helping the person stay warm, and you might also be able to, boil some water to make a hot drink for them. And so that's basically what, you want to do if you run into an injury, if the person gets injured. Well, because it can take a long time before a rescue crew gets in to the location.
Thank you, Russ. There's one other thing to think about in terms of why a group of 4 for a minimum is good. Many times in the winter, you're going to need to use snowshoes to break out the trail. If the snow is very deep, it's exhausting for just one person to do it. What you do is have 4 people so that the first person is making one track, the second person is putting their feet in the opposite spots, the third person is packing down all the debris, and everybody's lead is rotating all this time so that the first person goes to the back after 20 or 30 paces, the second person goes to the back, but the fourth person is getting rest. But quickly, the fourth person is going to get to the front of the line. And as long as you've got more than 3 people, someone is getting rest in the group, and you can cover a lot more ground over the course of a day without the group all getting tired out. So that's why we have a minimum of 4, the combination of safety, and also it makes the group stronger.
I wanted to interject something in terms of the pack and safety things. And I think also as a hike leader, and as somebody who started out not being a hike leader, I started out as a newbie and a novice, like we all did. I used to assume that the hike leaders were going to have everything in their pack to rescue me if I got injured or was feeling ill. Well, that's not a really good assumption. Because they don't. And I fell once, and I cut my hand open on the carriage road in Minnewaska, and the person who was leading the hike didn't have a first aid kit, so I couldn't assume that. So what I want to stress to everybody is everybody needs to be responsible for their own health and safety, and make sure that you have what you need on your particular hike to keep yourself safe and comfortable. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to carry a 70-liter pack with everything that we're going to be talking about. It might be a good idea if you're hiking in a group of friends to coordinate with other people what they have in their packs, so that you don't, you're not burdened with this very heavy pack. Certainly as women, I don't like to carry something that is going to just kill me. I'm not as strong as somebody like Russ is. So I try to coordinate with anybody that I'm hiking with, if it's a group of people, what everybody's bringing, so that we can all help each other. I also want to mention one more important device, and that is I always carry my Garmin with InReach technology, which I can call search and rescue from this. It's by subscription. It's about $25 a month, but it's my peace of mind button. So we don't necessarily need to depend upon cell phones, but this is a topic for a whole other webinar. But I just wanted to mention that we don't necessarily have to run down mountains anymore if one of us carries this device.
Yeah, I started carrying the Garmin InReach this summer. And I've found it very helpful because I can tell my backup buddy not only when I'm going to be out so that he can wait for my call, I can also send him my route so he can be watching me on his computer at home to find out where along my route I am, so that if I stop sending and I've hurt myself and I can't push the SOS button myself, he can tell the rescuers, hey, he is down at this particular spot, and he should have reported some movement by then. So I found it to be very useful. The last bit of planning a hike that we have on our agenda for the evening is part of what Sharon just described, the InReach device. It has some navigation capability, but you need to decide ahead of time what navigation tools you're going to use. We're all old school. We think you should have a map and a compass with you at all times. Maps and compasses don't have batteries that die, but I do carry a backup battery pack for the last couple of years that I can use to recharge my cell phone, to recharge my Garmin device. I use All Trails or Ride with GPS to plan out hikes. I don't typically use those to follow along while I'm doing the hike, but others that are with me have their phone out and they're following the route that I've taken to bushwhack up Lone in the Catskills on Gaia, and they're saying, no, Dave, you want to be on the next ridge, not this ridge, because I'm going off of memory as much as anything of what I did the last time that Russ and I climbed that mountain in the wintertime. So it's a helpful backup tool if people have different kinds of technology in the group. That's part of why it's better to hike in a group than just have one person. The next
So
part
up
of
here, we use the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference maps, which load into an app called Avenza. Avenza is the portal for the maps, and you don't need cell service for that. It goes off a satellite tower. And I think that might be a topic of another webinar. I'm going to see if we can get the Trail Conference in to do a little primer on how to use Avenza and their maps.
No, that's great.
But we carry a paper map, and working with Avenza maps in our phone, we can pretty much get where we need to go, regardless of whether we have the technology or not.
That's right. I got the GPS some years ago, just a regular Garmin GPS without the SOS thing, because I did this hike and the weather started to turn and I turned around, but I knew there was a waterfall not far ahead, but I didn't know how far ahead. And I found out afterwards that it was like a few hundred yards down the trail after where I turned around. I certainly had enough time to go another few hundred yards to look at this beautiful waterfall instead of having to drive 2 hours to get back there again to discover this. So having some GPS backup information or something like Avenza offline is helpful just for the fun factor, not just the emergency use. The next items to talk about how we prepare for the hike. We prepare for the hike by getting in shape for the hike. Bryna, do you want to jump in for a second and describe how you prepare for your hikes?
Sure. So, well, first of all, I have a dog, and so my dog keeps me going on my hikes, but I tend to do starting with like 2 miles and build up. So even today, I'm doing 3 to 5 miles every day, mostly with my dog, but I hike. I don't belong to a gym, but I do have 5-pound weights at home. So between my weights at home and just my walking is really all that I do to prepare for a hike, but I'm very consistent about it.
Thank you, Bryna. Sharon, do you want to jump in too?
Yeah, sure. So before I started hiking, I mean, I've only really been hiking, I guess, maybe 5 years. I've had bad foot problem before that, which I finally got a hold on. And as soon as I got my surgery, I started hiking vehemently. But before that, I was a bicyclist, and I rode horses for many years, and I have a green belt in karate, and I've been active most of my life. And what I do now is I think it's important for me to go to the gym. I have a knee injury that I wear a knee brace for when I do steep climbing. So I work on strength training, and that also keeps me balanced, because a lot of hiking is balance. I mean, we're walking on precarious footing, and we've got to have know where our center of gravity is. So to me, the gym is really important to keep in shape for this.
Thank you, Sharon. Russ, you want to chime in?
Well, I stay in shape by keep hiking. I try to hike as much as I can. I feel that the best way to stay in shape for for any kind of activities to do that activity. But I do exercise at a gym, and to get ready for winter hiking, I was a warm weather hiker, but I would not go out in the winter because I thought that you couldn't do that. It would be just too cold. And so I stayed indoors, and by March I was going crazy. I had cabin fever. And so then I started going out, extending my warm weather hiking. Instead of stopping in October, I would go into November. And then when I got used to November, I go into the next month. And so then that's how I got into winter hiking. I just sort of went from, edged into it, from warmer to colder. And that's basically how I got into winter hiking at in the first place. And it was
Thank you,
the
Russ.
desire to get out of the house, and it was also, just getting used to being in the cold for, several hours.
Thank you, Russ. My answer is similar to Russ's. I keep in shape for snowshoeing in the wintertime by going hiking often the rest of the year. I used to go mountain biking in the summertime, but I discovered that didn't really keep me in shape for snowshoeing. What kept me in shape for snowshoeing was to make sure I go hiking in November and in December, and not just take those 2 months off because it's sort of yuck season. So that's what's helped me the most. Bryna, do we have any questions in the chat that we ought to answer before we move on to the first video?
No, none so far.
Wonderful. Okay. Or bummer. Okay. Let's, Jeanette, go into the first video. This is our what to wear, what Dave Mong wears on a winter day hike.
Hi, I'm Dave Mong, and I am here to show you how I dress for a winter day hike. I have all the stuff on the car with, except my boots. My boots are down here. They are Sorel boots with a removable liner. I typically wear a pair of thin liner socks with a plastic bag on top of that, and then a sock to fill the boot, and then the boot insulation protects me from there. The plastic bag on my feet is so that I can keep the foot sweat away from all the insulation. I will stay warmer that way, ultimately, if I have to stand around very much. I have a lot on. The whole point for winter hiking is to try and not sweat. So once I get going, if I start exercising, I'm going to start sweating, and we don't want to do that. Wet clothes means frozen person. So I don't want to stop the group if I can help it, so I will start taking some clothing off that's easy to maneuver with. So I'll take an outer layer of gloves off. These are fingerless mittens or fingerless gloves. I can take them off and I can stuff them in a coat pocket. I have 2 hats on. The first hat is a balaclava. The top hat is just a regular stocking cap. I don't find it's warm enough without both layers when I'm just starting or when I'm cold. So I take this top layer off and I can stick it in another pocket. So far I haven't had to stop the group in order to put stuff away. I will next want to unzip my jacket so that as I'm walking along, I'll have wind blowing in my inner layers. I will probably at some point take my next layer of gloves off so I can have bare skin. If I'm touching my ice axe or ski poles, that really will cool me down. I can stick those in my pocket as well. I'll unzip my jacket and let air start flowing in. I can take my other balaclava off, stick that in a pocket. If I'm still getting hot but I don't want to stop the group to take a layer off, I can take my jacket and pull up the sleeves some, which will give me a little more cooling power. I will take the jacket and open it up all the way. I have wind pants on top of long johns. I have a side zip on the wind pants so I can open them up and I can get air inside. I've got those on both sides. It really will cool you down a lot doing that. If it comes to the point where I have to stop and take a layer off, I can get rid of the shell jacket, stick it in my pack, or hand it to somebody and they can jam it in the pack for me. You want to put stuff in the pack in order to keep clothing dry. Sometimes there's snow falling off the trees. If it's warm out, the snow's gonna melt and drip on you even on a nice, beautiful, sunny day. Next layer I have on is this fleece jacket. I will frequently hike with just that or with no jacket at all, just in my long john top. Take that off, stick it in my pack. Next thing to come off would be my wind pants. I can typically get those off with my boots still on. I would have to take snowshoes off. I can keep them, I can keep micro spikes on, I can keep crampons on without removing them. That takes me down to my last layers. So I'm wearing shorts over my long underwear bottoms. We frequently will hike in the winter just with shorts and a long john top, and then add mittens or hats back again if we need it. You can see on my legs I have leggings. The leggings keep my calves warm, but the primary purpose of that legging is to fill out extra space in my boot. And as I get cold, I will add layers back on, but you want to try and minimize the time you have to stop to put layers on and off. You want to do all these little things first, but the whole goal is not to get damp at all if you can avoid it. And put your clothes in your pack, the excess ones, to stay dry, so they'll be ready for you to take back out again when you get cold. The one thing I have that I will have close to the top of my pack is shell gloves to put over my gloves that I had on to start with. So if my hands get cold, I can add this to keep warm. In my pack I have other stuff. I'm going to do a separate video of that so you can see what I carry in my winter day pack. That's it for now. Thank you for watching.
Well, Dave, that was great. I wanted to add something to that for the women out there in terms of the leggings. I don't know if anybody can see this. I have get my leggings from Vermont Country Store, and they can easily slip over most of my winter pants. And so I like pull them up and I pull them down all through the hike. I mean, I start with them up, and then as I'm climbing up the mountain, I'll roll them down. And then if we stop for snack, I'll roll them back up again. It's like opening and closing a window. And they're really easy to buy, and they're just really comfy.
Thank you, Sharon. What else do you do that differs from what I presented?
I do a lot of what you do. I make sure that whatever I have has air conditioning options. I mean, I have when I always keep in when it's really frigid weather, I have an 850 fill down jacket with a hood, and I keep that in my pack. So if I did get sweaty during the hike and we stop and I don't want to freeze, I will throw that over like a heavy blanket. And then when we start moving again, I'll take it off and I'll put it back in my pack. And that jacket, actually, it's an REI jacket. It has vents under the armpits. So I have a couple of pieces of clothing that have air vents which open. And also North Face makes a jacket that has little like pinhole vents as well, which for shoulder season especially, it lets the air out, but it also keeps you pretty well insulated. And both of these are waterproof and breathable.
Thank you. Russ, what do you do differently?
What I wear is I wear synthetic long johns, top and bottom. And on top of that, I wear a fleece shirt. It's not a real thick one, but it's a heavy winter weight one. And then on top of that, I have a fleece jacket. And then on top of that, I have my rain jacket and sometimes the rain pants, but I don't usually need them. As I get warm, on my head, I have a hat, and on my hands, I have glove liners, and then I have mittens that where the mitten part folds back, and you have gloves with finger holes that only go halfway down your finger, so you get, you know, good dexterity. And yet, when your hands get cold, you can put the mitten part back on, because mittens are warmer than gloves. And if I'm going to be using my hands and I feel I'll be getting my gloves wet, I use a shell liner like you showed, you know, waterproof shell liner. And on my feet, I have sock liners, synthetic sock liners, and wool socks. But you know, but usually what happens, that's the way I start out. I might, if it's really cold, I might carry a puffy down jacket just in case, you know, we have to stop for a while, but I usually don't wear it. But once I get started hiking, I'll be hiking in just the fleece shirt and I forgot to mention that over the bottom part of the long johns, I wear synthetic hiking pants that have a lining, a warm lining. So, but after I get warmed up, I'll be doing most of the hike in just fleece shirt and the hiking pants. And I have gaiters that go up to my knees, so that keeps my lower legs warm. And you know, I find that if lots of times I have to take my hat and because I get too hot, but you know, you lose from your head, your hands, and your feet. So it's important to keep your head warm. But you know, that's just basically what I wear.
Thank you, Russ. Bryna, do you have a couple of
Yeah, I
things
was just going to say for women, I also have Sorel Caribou winter boots that the liner comes out like Dave was showing. They're pretty heavy, but they are warm, and I've never had a problem with my feet being cold in them. So I'm really happy with these. And Dave recommended them to me, 5 years ago, I think, and they've been wonderful. So for a female, for a boot, not as heavy as Dave's.
I also wanted to add one thing to the footwear department. A pitch for a company called Sealskin, SEALSKINZ, Sealskins. They make waterproof socks, waterproof hats, and waterproof gloves of all different weights. And I found this, that if you happen to soak your foot in a stream by accident, or your boot was not as waterproof as you thought, these are really great. You can always stop and put these on. I don't necessarily wear them for the entire hike, but they're an emergency measure. And that's another thing I also want to talk about is making sure that your boots are waterproof. Even boots that say that they're waterproof, you still have to spray with a silicone spray and keep them waterproof, because the waterproofing will disappear from your boots eventually. So, and for any boots that are leather skinned or nubuck, I use mink oil, and I seal it up with mink oil, and that keeps it pretty tight.
I also recommend wearing a gaiter over your boot. I have ski super gaiters over my boots. It does two things. One, it helps keep the laces from getting wet. So if you have lace-up boots, they're not getting all frozen. And if you stuff your foot in the stream, it gives you an extra little half second of protection that you might be able to pull your foot out of the stream before it goes into the top of your boot. So that's something that's helpful. Bryna, was there any chat questions before we go on to the next video?
There was no chat. And I was going to say one more thing. I'm not a person that likes heavy clothing. So I have found that Columbia, I'm plugging another company, has winter wear that's called Omni Heat inside. And it really does keep me warm. The more you walk on it, the more you wear it. If you're a person that gets cold, which I do, but I don't like heavy clothes, it keeps me very warm. We have our first question. Wait 1 second. Now we have 3. They've all come up. What jacket do you recommend for the outer layer? What is the temperature for this equipment? And that's it. So what is the jacket? What do you recommend for outerwear? And what's the temperature for this equipment?
For me, the jacket that I had in the video was a Rab event method of breathability. Prior to that, I was using a Gore-Tex jacket by North Face. The event version was something that a whole bunch of my friends were using, and they kept saying that they weren't sweating in that. So I went out and dropped a bundle for it 12 years ago and immediately discovered I sweat inside the thing just as bad as my Gore-Tex one. But their response is you sweat less. Now, you want to have a shell in order to protect the loft of your inner layers from the convection of the wind sucking that heat away. So the shell doesn't provide much of any warmth typically, other than it prevents the wind from getting at all the insulating layers. Russ, do you want to add some comment about that too?
Well, yeah, I when it's not that cold, I wear on the outer layer a shell too, a Marmot Precip. It's a rain jacket. And when it gets colder, I have a Columbia winter weight waterproof, rain jacket. They both have hoods, so you can keep your head really warm, back of your neck warm. But basically, that's where we're on the outside. But like we've been saying that I often take that off because you don't want to perspire, because even if since you're wearing synthetic clothes next to your skin and it's wicking away the perspiration, your other clothing that's your warm layer is going to start getting damp, and it's not as effective. And also you don't really want to have any dampness next to your skin. So when I'm hiking, unless it's raining, my outer layer is just a fleece jacket or a fleece shirt.
Thank you. Bryna, would you read the question again to make sure that we answered it completely?
Yeah, so, and I just put in there, someone asked me what kind of boot I have. So I just put in there, they're Sorel Caribous. The first question was, what's the temperature for this equipment?
In that case, the answer for temperature is that I wear my jacket that I showed in the video year round. I bring that on summer trips. I bring it on winter trips. If I'm at a place where I'm going on a hike and it's going to be windy and cool and raw, it's going to protect my inner layers, and it's lighter than some other things I could carry. So it's used in warm and cold, but like Russ was saying, as long as you're not sweating, you can wear whatever you want. You can slow the pace down to keep from sweating, or you can take layers off underneath it. So I may just have the shell with long john top under it, because I don't want to get my green heavy fleece wet. So it's all just a matter of finding that balance of being slightly too cool instead of slightly too warm, because slightly too warm means sweat.
All right, we have two more questions, and I want to
Yeah,
clarify
but
to
I'd like
everybody.
add one thing up to another question is that I think it's hard to say temperature ratings, because some people are warmer than other people. Some people feel the cold and have trouble with dealing with cold, and other people, it doesn't bother them that much. So it's really, what you are and how, the type of temperatures you can, whether you are a hot hiker or a cold hiker, so.
And I want to add one thing to that. And I agree with you. It depends, depends upon your own body thermometer. I happen to be one of these people that I'm a serial warrior. I always think of what do I need and what do I want to wear? What do I want to put in my pack in case I or anybody else I'm hiking with has to sit around, is not feeling well, and we have to wait for a couple of hours, and we have to sit in the cold. So I stuff my pack with all kinds of things to keep me warm and other people warm. And so I might take 2 or 3 different jackets with me. And that also serves the purpose of being able to change clothes as I go through the day, and if we're stopping for bathroom breaks and things like that. So this is my go-to jacket. It's a 650 weight down. I think it's a fall raven jacket. And I also carry my 850 fill with me, and I carry a very light, like a nano puff from Patagonia, with a vest that I can also pull over. The question for me is being flexible and having many different situations in my pack.
Thank you,
Okay,
Sharon. I like the question. Was it Carla that asked on how cold would you dare go out in the woods? Was that did I hear the question right, Bryna?
No, so, and I just, so 2 more things. One is someone is asking me to clarify how to chat. So in the chat function, you can say to everyone or just to me, either way. So questions are coming in, but they're not all being to everybody. So if you want everybody to see your question in the chat, go to for everybody. So I have 2 more questions for you, Dave. An unlined soft shell will provide wind protection and snow and drizzle from getting you wet, ? And secondly, what's the best spray for waterproofing? And I would add, it doesn't have to be a spray, it can be a gel, but you can answer.
The soft shell is something that I have a soft shell jacket that I have worn, but I don't like it. It's not really rainproof. You can brush, if it's cold enough, you can brush off the snowflakes and they won't get you too wet. But I generally don't use that jacket very much. I've carried it, decided it was too heavy. The one I showed in the video for what I wear is lighter and it does a pretty good job. So that's what I typically carry. What was the second part of the other question?
What is the best spray?
The best spray for waterproofing boots?
I use a silicone spray. It doesn't deplete the ozone layer. They don't do that anymore. I wish I had it with me. So please send me your email and I will take a picture of it and I'll send it to you. But it really works. It's a silicone spray. I actually got it at Kenco on Route 28 in Kingston.
Snow Seal is what I use on a leather boot.
Use.
It's what I used to use on my hiking boots in the summer. It's what I use on my cross-country ski boots when I was cross-country skiing. The Sorels that I showed you, I've never had to waterproof because they are a waterproof material. They're not really real leather. And that's part of what the advantage of that boot was. I've never had to waterproof it. And I've been using them for about 12 years now. Same pair of boots.
Okay, we have a boatload of questions here. If you can.
Let me sneak one question in, Bryna.
Sure.
I had a direct message from Carla rather than to everyone. So I want to ask her question first.
Right.
She's asked, because it's such a great question. What temperature range do you hike in? What's the coldest? And I always carry a thermometer on my hikes. Now, I also do a lot of backpacking. So the coldest temperature that I have proof that I did it was 26 below zero on the thermometer at Adirondack Lodge. And we all carried our packs up onto Wright to camp overnight for 2 nights. And it warmed up to 5 below for the camping overnight part. But it was generally below zero the whole trip. So I pretty much will go out in all kinds of temperatures. The things I avoid are when the temperatures are close to 32 degrees and the weather report says we might have wintry mix or rain. I generally speaking have had enough experience with those kind of conditions that I don't wish it on myself or anyone else that I take out in the woods anymore. So I will tend to not do trips that people are going to get wet from external forces, because it's almost impossible to stay dry when it's cold outside and you're exercising. So you got to pay attention to the weather report to avoid going out when it's going to be too close to wintry mixed conditions. Bryna, go ahead and do the other questions you had.
The next one's a great segue into your next part, which is what do you pack in your pack? And the question is, what is the average weight of packs with all the clothing and supplies involved with the winter hiking? And that's a great segue to where you're going next.
Let's do the video first, and after we do that, Bryna will ask the same question, because like Sharon was saying, she fills her pack up with stuff to have lots of choices, and I do the same thing, and we'll be able to see which of us do different things. So go ahead, Jeanette, and start that other video.
Dave, back again to do a video of what I carry in my winter day pack. You'll see that I've got in this case, a 70-liter pack. I have carried smaller packs. For the most part, I could still carry a smaller pack, but I like this larger one because it leaves me lots of space to put extra stuff in it that I've taken off. It also keeps my back warmer because there's more pack behind me. You see I have a insulated carrier on my chest. This allows me to have a water bottle that's been full of boiling water that I can have on my person so I can get a drink of water frequently. I don't like using bladders because the bladder hoses will freeze, and no need to futz around with that. You'll see that I have a Garmin InReach device that I've started using. I do plan ahead on the trips, and I also have a backup person that I report to so he knows when I'm going to be safely out of the woods. I send him a link of where I am at on my hike and let him know when I'm safely done. And this has satellite communication in case I get in trouble. I don't rely on all trails or things like that. When I show you the pack, you'll see that I have a paper map in there, but I do plan out routes with all trails and things of that nature. So let me take off some stuff here. Now I haven't attached anything to the outside of the pack other than a pad. This pad is a full-length pad, so in case somebody gets hurt, there's a full-length pad for that person to lay on. The blue pad is a shorty pad that I use for myself to sit on to keep insulated from the ground. I have some things that I would normally strap on the outside of the pack depending on the plan of the trip and the lay of what the weather says the conditions are going to be. Typically I'm wearing snowshoes. The snowshoes that I like are good for brushy conditions. Has a televator in the back that I can pull up to make it easier going up steep inclines. Has lots of teeth on it for good gripping on icy conditions. I do carry bungee cords with me so I can strap them on the outside of the pack when it's time to switch to microspikes or crampons. I do have microspikes, I do have crampons. The crampons are in a bag, and I can stick this bag inside the pack or strap it on the outside. I typically carry one trekking pole, and depending on the conditions, I will carry the ice axe as well. Typically, I carry the ice axe. Ice axes are good for steep, icy spots where you need an extra handhold, and that's the primary reason I would carry it on a hike in the Catskills, for example. I use only one trekking pole typically. I have this stored behind my back where I can pull it out. I usually do one trekking pole so that I have one hand free to either stick in my pocket to keep warm and then I keep changing hands, or I will have a bag of food in one hand. Just like I have water handy, I'll have a bag of food in my jacket so that I don't have to take my pack off to eat. You want to drink small amounts continuously, eat small amounts continuously. I also have a bunch of extra food in my pack. I'm going to take off the pads. There's the shorty pad, the full length pad. We'll take the inside of the pack out first. I have a bag of first aid stuff. My first aid stuff is a little larger than most people because I typically am leading groups. I'm typically dealing with people with hot spots, maybe blisters if we don't catch them soon enough. If they sprain an ankle, I've got things to take care of it. Or if they cut themselves and they're bleeding, I've got things to deal with that. Those are the typical things that happen on the trips that I lead. And hardly any of that. This bag contains stuff that are extras. Most of the time I'll never use it, but I bring it anyways. I've got a spare pair of socks in case I step in a stream and get my feet soaking wet. This will give me something fresh to wear. These are the insulated liners for those Gore-Tex shells that I showed you before. This is a spare balaclava in case somebody's balaclava blows away. That has happened before. I have a spare balaclava for myself and a spare to give away to somebody. I have goggles in case it gets so windy that I need eye protection. All in one bag so I can pull it out and things aren't going to be flopping around somewhere. I carry an emergency gear of all my puffy clothes that I would be wearing if I was standing around in a campsite. I'm not backpacking on this hike, but sometimes people get hurt and you have to stand around for hours. You want to be able to protect yourself. So I would really recommend carrying a little extra stuff to stay warm. I have a full-size down jacket, and I also have puffy pants. These are Primaloft with side zips. The zippers are such that I can put these on with my boots on. I don't have to take, I have put them on and off with crampons on, but if you have snowshoes on, you'll have to take those off to do it. I carry an 8-person emergency shelter. This is basically a huge stuff sack big enough for 8 people to get inside. You open it up, throw your packs down inside, put your sit pads on top of that, and 4 people can sit side by side, face to face with another group of 4. Close up the ends like you would draw a stuff sack closed, and that'll raise the temperature inside to keep you protected if somebody gets hurt and you need to spend some time out in the open where it's windy and you need to get protection from that. I'll sometimes share this item with the rest of the group, so I'm not carrying all the group gear typically. I carry 2.5 liters of water, 2 liters in my pack. I've only got one of them here at the moment, and that's how I make sure that I'm well hydrated. Staying well hydrated helps you keep warmer. I have a pack cover to keep my pack dry. It sometimes rains, but sometimes it also drips all over you from snow melting off the trees. In the top of my pack, I have those monster mitts that I talked about before, the shells, so that they're accessible. I can't reach them with the pack on, but somebody else in the group can unzip it, grab them for me, and I don't have to stop and take my pack off if my hands get wet and then get cold. I have a face mask to go along with the goggles that I had further in the pack. I have a spare pair of mittens that I never wear, but I've got them so that I can give them away to somebody else in the group. I have toilet paper in a Ziploc bag with a spare Ziploc bag to put the dirty toilet paper in. You always want to carry out all the toilet paper with you. use an outhouse if it's available, but if an outhouse isn't available, carry it out with you. And I typically will carry it out even if I have an outhouse available. I have a spare balaclava also in the top of the pack for me to use. Sunglasses, in case I get glare on the snow. My glasses will give me some sunglass protection, but not enough sometimes. Spare liner gloves. I have a banner for the Appalachian Mountain Club, and I'll take a group photo. I'll take a group photo with this banner just to show off, hey, we did this hike, it was great, when I post photos. Have a little bit more food in the top of the pack. I have a Catskills Park map. I have a battery backup pack for my cell phone and for my Garmin device. I have a scooper for digging a hole for poop. Typically in the wintertime, the ground will be frozen and there'll be 3 or 4 feet of snow on top, so I really could leave that home in the winter, but it doesn't weigh anything. My emergency kit of everything else, a lot of the 10 essentials. I've got 2 headlamps in case one hand lamp, I need to give away a headlamp to somebody. I have some tenacious tape in case somebody needs something repaired. I got matches. I have a whistle, I have a compass. Sometimes I'll wear that as use the lanyard around my neck. Another headlamp. A knife, just odds and ends. And let's see. Here's the other liter of water that I didn't take out. And that is pretty much what I carry in my winter day pack. I'll adjust things a little bit. Sometimes I won't bring the crampons depending on the conditions. Sometimes I'll bring a little bit of extra stuff like spare long johns. If we've got a bunch of stream crossings to do and there's a possibility I might fall in, I'll bring some extra long johns. They don't take up much space, they don't weigh much, but this is what I generally do on a normal winter day hike. Thank you for watching.
Okay,
Yeah.
everybody, wonderful.
Dave, I wanted to quickly interject. A lot of people ask what's the difference between microspikes and crampons. Can you tell us?
Yes, microspikes are very short. See if I can hold mine up to the screen here, if people can see. This is a very, there are very tiny little spikes on here to give you a little bit of traction when there's just a snow-covered trail, but it's a little icy underneath. Very thin ice. If the ice is thicker, then the microspikes aren't going to hold. So you're going to need to switch to crampons. And the bag that I had was this yellow bag here. Let me open it up.
Were the microspikes Catulas?
Yes, yes, Catulas in my case.
They call those microspikes. There's a difference. I mean, Hill Sounds makes similar product, but they call those trail crampons.
Well, mine I've had for a dozen years. They've never gotten dull. I've never needed to buy anything new. As an example, these are crampons. You can see
Those are real full ice crampons.
these are full crampons that you can use for backpacking or ice climbing. I bought these when I was in high school in 1970, and I have been using them to this day on all my needs for crampons. So you buy a good quality crampon and take care of it, and it'll last forever.
I think
So-
in most of the hikes in the Catskills, even in the high peaks, I think that probably would be a little bit more aggressive than what we normally need, unless you're in the Devil's Path and Sugarloaf has some ice flows like that, but most of the time I think you can use just Hill Sound, their version of the micro spikes,
The Hill Sound
trail crampons.
trail crampon was probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
The camp stalker is fine. There has been one of the trails I wanted to do was on Blackhead going down the east side, and that trail gets really icy sometimes. So ice axe and crampons are really essential there, depending on the conditions. I've chosen to go a different way, so we didn't have to use the ice axe, use the crampons, and we got by with snowshoes. We are running tight on time. We have 25 minutes left. I do want to handle some more of the questions, but before we get to the questions, let's get Sharon to talk a little bit about what is in her pack that differs a little bit from what I'm doing, if anything.
Okay, I don't have my pack here to show, and might not come out on the video so well, but as I mentioned, I pack for as many what if cases as I can, and that's regardless of whether I'm leading a hike or whether I'm with friends. Inevitably somebody will forget something, and I bring spares of everything. I've actually had a situation where my microspike broke. So, the rubber just snapped on it. So I always bring an extra pair of microspikes with me. They don't weigh very much, and I put them in a little stuff sack. I bring a dull pair of microspikes, my older pair, because especially during shoulder season in spring when things are melting, you'll get patches of ice and patches of just ground. And so you don't need those really, really sharp ones. So I'll bring the dull ones with me. I always bring a thermos of tea, of hot liquid. And also I always have food. I always keep refueling as I'm hiking. I'm finding that my hiking is feeling a lot better now that I'm eating constantly throughout the hike. So I have that handy with me. And also I have hand warmers, feet warmers, toe warmers, body warmers. That's my emergency stuff. I have a little bit more in my first aid kit. I have a sling. I have rubber gloves. I have an extra mask. I have ibuprofen. I have gauze and things, and anything I need to take care of topical injuries. Just enough hydration and plenty of clothing. I have lots of changes of clothing in my pack, and I try to keep my pack as light as possible. So I try to make sure my clothing is light. I also carry 2 space blankets, and the space blankets fold up into tiny little things, as well as a bivy sack. Because my biggest fear of hiking in the winter is that we're going to have to stop and we're going to have to stay. All of us are going to have to stay warm. And I absolutely hate being cold. Most people who know me think I love hiking in winter, but that's not really true. I just pretend I do. So I try to stay as warm as I possibly can. And I carry my Garmin, and I just plan for emergencies that thankfully have not happened to me.
Great, Sharon. Russ, you want to, before I have Russ say his, let me just let everybody know, we're going to run out of time. But all of the questions that you asked when you registered, we have answered all those questions on paper. And right after the meeting, I'm going to email that to everyone. All the new questions that you are asking during this meeting, Russ and I and Sharon are going to write those questions and answers into adding to that list. And then we will send it out again after that, so that we don't miss any of your questions, even if we can't get to it tonight, just so everyone knows. Russ, do you want to talk a little bit about your winter day pack?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be the outlier because my winter day pack has probably got the least amount of things in it compared to you and Sharon's packs. But what I have in there is I have a first aid kit. I have a closed cell pad that I can sit on as an insulator from the cold ground or cold rock. I carry rain gear even if it's not gonna rain at all that day, because it's also a good windbreaker. I carry a puffy down jacket, I carry extra gloves and socks, and an extra hat. In case any of those things get wet, I can change. Let me think what else. I carry food and water. But I don't carry a lot of clothing, because I tend to hike hot, so I don't need a lot of clothing. I just need to have something to wear if I have to stop. And I might carry like heavy outer pants to put over, like pants you would wear around a campsite in the winter. They're not like yours that are puffy, but they're a heavy, real heavy fleece. And let's see, what else? I think, well, I carry a headlamp, and I have a little flashlight that I use that's this big. This is a backup light. I can't, because in case my headlamp needs a battery changes and it's dark, I use that. I don't use that for hiking, but I have map and compass and a whistle and some other safety gear. I have a full-length closed cell pad that I carry, and I carry that emergency thing that I told you about earlier, the bivy sack with the 2 contractor bags and the fire starter and the matches. And I might carry a thermos of hot drink. I have a small thermos, so it's not a big one. It's a thermos made for hiking. So it gives you like 2 cups of drink, 2 large cups, mug size. And that's about it. I think I can't think of anything else I put in the pack.
Somebody is asking in the chat, what kind of thermos do you use? And this is a 33 ounce or 1 liter thermos that I use, which keeps it cold in the summer and hot in the winter. I don't know, it's called Microlight, and I just keep it with a carabiner on the side of my pack, so I always have that liquid close to me. And they also make a ½ liter version, which I keep in the side pouches for my hot beverage. And in the summer, I use the Nalgene bottles, which are 1 liter, and the Nalgenes come with an insulated sleeve that you could also carabiner to the side of your pack.
I also have purchased a thermos that I started using this summer, and I plan on carrying some this winter. It's a 2 liter wide mouth thermos. So I can carry 2 liters of boiling hot water in it. And I have tried taking this thermos and leaving it overnight outside, and it's nice and toasty the next morning for a hot drink. So it would warm somebody up, and 2 liters is a lot of capacity. But just keep in mind, that's a lot of weight. That's 4 pounds of your pack weight right there. My pack typically is around 20 pounds on a winter day hike, but keep in mind that 5 to 7 pounds of that is water weight. So that's where a lot of the weight comes. So the way to make your pack lighter is to keep drinking water throughout the day so that your pack gets lighter by the water disappearing. Bryna, do you want to talk a little bit about your winter day pack?
Not really. I don't do much different than anybody else. That I think so. That's all there. Sorry, I had the hiccups. Question is, what kind of food or snacks do you bring? And another question about dogs on winter hikes.
Let's do foods here. I'll do a little bit, and then I'll turn it over to everybody else as well. I make a butterscotch brownie that has nuts and coconut and chocolate chips and all sorts of good stuff in it. It's a great recipe. You cut it up in little tiny pieces so that you don't have to bite into a frozen block of something. In the email that I'm going to send you after the meeting, I have the recipe for that included, so you can use that for yourself. It's called a winter mountaineering bar. I bring sandwiches. I thaw them out in my pocket. I bring Gorp, good old raisins and peanuts. You just want to keep nibbling all the time to keep your energy levels up. Russ, what do you do for food?
Well, I pretty much do the same thing, mixtures of nuts, dried fruits, and dried coconut, and candies like M&Ms or chocolate chunks. And I might do salami or pepperoni, turkey pepperoni or salami, and pretzel nuggets, or I might eat chunks of cheese with Triscuit crackers. Generally, I try to have little Ziploc bags of things that I keep in my pocket and nibble as I walk. But if the weather's not too cold, I might make a sit-down lunch, because I can find that I can sit down for 20 minutes before I start to get cold. So that's enough time to have, a lunch like you would have in the warm weather. And sometimes I might make a sandwich, but cut it up into bite-sized pieces and put it in a Ziploc bag so I can eat it in pieces as I walk. But basically, I take what I like to eat. I don't try to eat anything differently than I would normally eat on a hike. In the winter, I don't tend to bring much of fruit, like especially oranges or mandarins, because your fingers get wet when you're peeling those. And I don't tend to bring fresh fruit because the juice of the fruit will drips on my hands, and then that makes my hands sticky, and I can't wear gloves when I eat, or glove liners. So I try to stay away from some like that kind of food that'll be kind of drippy or messy.
Sharon, go ahead and add your spin on this.
Yeah, I tend to try to have a really big breakfast. I try to have fats, carbs, and protein for breakfast, so that I'm arriving, I'm arriving with lots of energy in my body, and I'll eat all through. I'll have granola bars. I'll just be nibbling on. Peanut butter is always a great sandwich for me. A tuna sandwich, just normal lunches. But I agree with Russ that I try to really. I don't eat a big lunch because you don't want to stop for too long. I mean, the whole thing is you really have to, it's easier to stay warm than to get warm. So I try to just stay warm and keep moving and just eat all through the day. And that's only recently that I finally discovered that that's what works for me, because I was wondering why I was running out of fuel. I'm not even up the mountain yet, and I've run out of energy. So I found the system that works for me, and everybody's body is different. I mean, you have to really experiment. Everybody burns fuel differently in their bodies as well. So everybody has to experiment with it and find what works for you.
Great. Bryna, do you want to add anything that you need to add?
No, I too just snack all day long, but I also like hard-boiled eggs, already peeled, to snack on, because to me that gives me some extra energy. I don't eat meat at all, so a hard-boiled egg does help me just moving along. So that's the only other thing other than Kind bars and Gorp and everything else.
That's great. So let's move into the dogs as the next part of that question. So whether to have a dog on your trip or not depends on your trip leader. If your trip leader allows it or not, you need to make sure up front that that's allowed if you're going with another group. If you have a dog, you need to think in terms of the dog as being the same as a regular participant. Dogs get cold, dogs get tired, dogs get thirsty. So you need to have food for the dog, you need to have water for the dog, you need to have sometimes clothing protection for the dog, depending on how cold it is. If your dog is not used to summer hiking, don't start taking the dog out in the wintertime. You need to start just like you would for yourself. Start in the fall, progress into the colder shoulder season in November. If the dog is having trouble in November, you don't want to take the dog out in January. You want to move into that just like you would a person getting acclimatized to the situation. I would recommend that you don't have the dog carry its food and you want to make sure the dog is on a leash, because if the dog escapes with its food attached to it and the bear is not hibernating yet, the dog is going to come running back to you, and that could have poor consequences. The other issue is that when the snow is deep and you get off the trail, you can get buried in a spruce trap. And if the dog is running free, the dog can also get trapped and you don't know where the dog is. So a spruce trap is where the snow is built up on the branches of the tree, and there's all these air pockets underneath. So if you step off the trail, this little tree that's sticking up that's 1 foot tall might be 10 feet tall. And it's like stepping into quicksand. You can't get out without help sometimes. So the same thing can happen to a dog if the dog gets off leash. So I would be very careful about having your dog come along on your hike. Does anybody else want to add stuff about dogs?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would like to
just-
add,
okay,
as a dog owner, my dog has bolted a couple of times, which is why she doesn't come out with me anymore. Unless she's leashed and tethered to me. You also have to think about the other people in the group. Your dog must have a solid recall. I mean, and it needs to be as solid as if the dog was trained by in the Army. And the reason being is if your dog bolts and runs off and chases something, and you're with a group of people and it's cold out there, we're not going to leave you there in the woods to go and find your dog. You're going to have to wait for the dog. You don't want to leave the woods without finding your dog either. So the rest of the group also has to stand there waiting for you to get your dog back. So really, really think of everybody else in the group before you bring your dog out. What would happen in the worst case scenario if your dog got away? What would the rest of us do?
I have a greyhound, and I always thought the greyhound would be a great dog to take on a hike. Well, I took this dog out on a spring hike, and it turns out the dog is great for the first quarter mile of this uphill walk. And we weren't going fast, but the dog just said, "I'm bored." And the dog just laid down, and I had to walk the dog back down to the car, put him in the car, and drive up to the top of the mountain so we could look at the great view. While he slept and I looked at the great view. So you can't assume that the dog's on the same wavelength as you are. Yeah, the dog's wanted to go with me every time I go out, and I finally take the dog and the dog is like, "This is boring." So the dog is just a regular participant, and you have to plan for that participant being safe. Now, Bryna has a story I want her to describe it, because it's a summer situation, but the same thing is true in the winter. If the dog gets wet, the dog gets cold. So go ahead and tell your story, Bryna.
Oh, all right. I was going to say, before I get to that, don't forget about the dog's paws. And I'm a proponent of musher's paw, that you put on their paws so that their paws, number one, don't get caked with snow, but number two, if you're on rocks and stuff, that it protects their paws. So I was going to say that. So we were on a summer backpack, and a young woman was with us with her dog, and we got caught in a raging thunderstorm that came up out of the blue over the mountain. And the adults were protected for the most part, with a canopy. We had put up a tarp. Our tents were pretty decent, except this young woman had put her tent kind of away from the rest of us because of the dog, and a raging stream came through her tent. She decided at one point that the dog was cold and she didn't have the right equipment for the dog. So she put the dog in her tent, and the dog shook, because that's what dogs do when they get wet, and got everything in the tent wet. All her sleeping bag, her clothes, and we ended up packing out in the dark in a thunderstorm because she and her dog were not prepared. Is that what you wanted me to say, Dave?
That's what that's what I wanted people to hear. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions we need to get to? We've got just 6 minutes left, and we'll just
No.
keep.
Yeah, we're good.
Look, I'd like to tell a story about a dog that I heard. The dog ran off following a scent, and when the dog came back, he was running towards his owner, and the owner didn't know until it was too late that there was he was running back because a bear was chasing him. So he ran back to his owner and stood behind his owner for protection. And so the owner had to fight the bear off as best as he could. But they do make booties for dogs too, I know, because we used to have dogs, and they do have little booties for them to protect their paws from snow and rocks and things like that. I think dogs have to, they can be part of the group, but I think they have to, be well trained and get along with people and not be aggressive when people are trying to eat. So you just have to know your dog and see, if he would be well behaved enough to be part of a group. But it's fun to hike with a dog. I like it.
The thing is, what people hike with their dogs and they say, "Oh, my dog loves it." Well, your dog loves to be with you. We don't really know that the dog really loves it as much as we think the dogs love it. I mean, a lot of people will project their own feelings and opinions onto their animals, and it's not necessarily the case. The dog will follow you until it drops dead. I mean, we know that it's not necessarily good for the dog. But we have to really make sure that we're not projecting our feelings onto the animal. So I leave my dog home most of the time.
Yeah. The other issue is there's more than one dog on the hike. The two dogs have to be social enough around other dogs, not just other people, and that adds a whole twist to the dynamic as well.
Yeah.
There was a dog leash
I'd-
question.
No, I'd like to just show a comparison between the micro spikes and the crampons so people get an idea of the difference in use. These are a pair of my boots I wear on day hikes. They're not lined and they're just leather boots, but they're well waterproofed. They keep me warm. But these are the micro spikes. You can see, how they're little tiny things. And these are a pair of my winter boots with crampons, and you can see the difference in the teeth. These are meant to dig in deep into ice. These others, the micro spikes, just sort of touch the surface. And so when the ice is thick and hard and you go on going down a steep descent, you really need something like this. Because I know somebody who was coming down from Algonquin in the winter with micro spikes, and they have some slab rocks that are a pretty sharp angle. And his micro spikes just broke loose and he went sliding head over heels down the ice, and he couldn't stop himself. And luckily he was able to grab onto a tree. So, you don't want to, trust micro spikes on thick, hard ice and on steep, descents or ascents. And you can sharpen your crampons much more easily than the micro spikes, because I find it impossible to sharpen the micro spikes, but the crampons have a big tooth, so you can just use a file and sharpen them up. You need to keep them sharp because they do get dull too, even though they have deep, teeth.
Russ, we have one more question that just came through about
Okay.
stuff, but I don't think we have enough time to answer it sufficiently. So we'll make a list of places to go hiking in the area that are appropriate for certain levels. Now, the nice thing about the Mid-Hudson chapter is that there are leaders that are all leading the kinds of hikes they want. So if you didn't know them before, Sharon and Russ now, and Jeanette, perhaps, so that you may find hike leaders that and you can find out from them what kind of hikes do you lead and go on one of their hikes. Or you can say, hey, this is the kind of hike I'm comfortable with. Which leader should I be signing up for their hike? And we will all give you the totally honest answer, because we want you to have fun. We want them to have a successful and safe hike. We are at our end time now. I am going to say thank you for coming. And we are going to take all the questions and make sure that all the answers get made. I've got an email going out as soon as we finish the meeting here with a bunch of links. This is not the last of these programs that we plan to do. It appears that we got through this successfully without totally embarrassing ourselves. So we will do more of these, probably on hiking, but we will also do one on backpacking. So there is more of this to come. Thank you for attending. And we want to end on time for everyone. If the presenters would stay on for just a minute after everybody else logs off, that would be helpful.
And
Thank
we
you
are
very much.
recording this. We are recording this and we can send the links to everybody.
Yes,
Yeah.
we'll send the link to the meeting to everybody.
Okay.
And so as soon as I'm going to give the word now that we're going to stop the recording, and everybody can sign off that hasn't already signed off, except for the presenters.